Hello pilots, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and in yesterday's video covering the 1.03 patch for Armored Core 6, I mentioned that unfortunately Bandai Namco and FromSoft did not provide us specific numbers on the sweeping changes that were made to the various different parts in AC6 with the patch yesterday, but I figured it wouldn't be very long before someone in the community put together a list of what the actual changes were after testing and or data mining everything, and now we have exactly that. Full credit to UmbraBliss on Reddit, who posted this full list of changes. Everyone should go check out their account. And UmbraBliss, if you wind up seeing this video through some miracle of nature and you have a YouTube channel or a Twitter account or some other aspect of your online presence that you want me to drop a link to so people can find you and find your content, by all means, let me know. I did not put this information together. That all goes credit-wise to them. I just want to disseminate that information for more people so that y'all know where we stand. So we're going to go through here. This is basically just me going to be reading all the most notable stuff. If you want to see anything specific, if you want to take the time to read it yourself, link to this post is in the description. Otherwise, we're just going to start going through things here. Might be a little bit of a longer one today, just because there's going to be a lot of information to process, but is what it is. Starting off with the ARM units, the explosive thrower was actually buffed a lot. The effective range was increased by effectively 50%. Its total rounds were nearly doubled, and its reload time was cut by 25%, so it should be a pretty solid option to try out now. The linear rifle Curtis had its recoil reduced by 6 points from 30 to 24, and its charge time was cut in half, which should be a very noticeable difference. I've actually been using the Curtis a little bit since this patch, and it feels so good to use. The linear rifle Harris was similarly buffed. Its charge attack power was actually increased by 127 points from 850 to 977. Its cooling was increased from 290 to 350, and its charge time was, like the Curtis, cut essentially in half from 1.5 seconds to 0.8. The shotgun Haldeman took a little bit of a hit to its direct hit adjustment, nothing too crazy, down from 205 to 190. And then, of course, as everyone knows, the Zimmies got hit hard, but not as hard as I expected it to be, actually. Its attack power was dropped by 100 points from 900 to 800. Its impact notably got hit pretty hard from 840 to 620. That's, what, like a 20% reduction, something along those lines? Quick mental math. So, accumulative impact and direct hit adjustment also got dropped. Accumulative impact by 60 points from 420 to 360, and direct hit adjustment from 205 to 180. The handgun Coqueliette, which I'm probably not pronouncing correctly, but it is what it is, had its total rounds increased significantly from 105 to 196, and the handgun Ducket also had its total rounds increased by nearly double from 98 to 182. Again, I've used the Duckets a little bit since this patch, similar to the Curtis, and while there's no damage increase or anything like that, just having so much more ammo feels incredible, and they make them far more viable in long missions. Speaking of handguns with increased ammo, we have the Sampu, the burst handgun that also essentially had its ammo doubled from 156 to 300. The needle gun Viento had its total rounds increased by 40, an increase of about 33% from 120 to 160. And then we get to the bazookas, which actually got pretty nicely buffed across the board. The Zhuangji had its reload time reduced from 4.2 to 3.4 and had its projectile speed increased. And note, for bazookas, that projectile speed increase is pretty much universal for everything we talk about here, so I'm not going to mention it each time. The Majestic had, again, projectile speed and its reload time reduced from 4.9 to 4.2. The Majestic definitely feels a lot better to use now. That's something I've been experimenting with. The Little Gem got its reload time reduced from 5.8 to 4.4, and the detonating bazooka Javelin Alpha had its reload time reduced from 5.0 to 4.3. Moving on to some of the grenade launchers, we have the Go Shen, had its total rounds increased by 8 from 32 to 40, and also got a projectile speed increase. Again, all of these grenade launchers got that projectile speed increase. It also had its reload time reduced from 7.5 to 5.9, a pretty significant drop. And much like all of the other grenade launchers and grenade cannons that we're going to talk about today, when it reaches its effective range, its rounds will explode regardless of contact. So you'll be able to get some good AoE damage and can potentially have some very tactical shots if you can lead your targets and judge the distance between you and them accordingly. The grenade launcher Dizzy had similar results. Projectile speed was increased, total rounds increased by 12, Very, very nice increase, almost 50%, and its reload time cut from 8.9 to 7.1. Now, notably, its effective range was reduced significantly from 680 to 285. So that is something that we're going to have to watch out for when trying to use these grenade launchers. They're going to be much closer range now, but got to keep in mind you have that explosion AoE that you'll be able to count on even if you don't hit your target. So that should balance it out a little bit. Finally, we have the grenade Iridium. It had an increase of total rounds from 20 to 32, an over 50% increase, as well as the projectile speed. Its reload time was cut from 6.3 to 4.5, and has reduced sway from accumulated recoil, which is actually interesting. And its effective range was also reduced from 625 to 245. Now we have the plasma rifle Nebula, which got nerfed pretty hard, similar to the Zimmerman's. Its charge attack power was dropped from 1908 to 1716. Its charge impact was dropped from 1152 to 840. Its accumulated impact from its charge attack was dropped from 612 to 432, and perhaps most painfully, its charge time was increased from 1.7 seconds to 2.7 seconds. This thing is going to take a while to charge now, and obviously, you know, you can modify that with your energy weapon adjustment based off of your generator and everything, but still, like, that hurts. That hurts a lot. The Nebula is going to be significantly less powerful now. Similarly, another nerf that we saw was to the Siege Hand Missile Aperitif, or Aperitif, I should say. Reload time was increased from 5 to 6.5, and its guidance was reduced from 220 to 180. Now, for back units and our expansion units, we have a round of changes as well. The grenade cannons saw similar changes to the handheld grenade launchers. Earshot had its reload time reduced from 12.8 to 9.3, and also has its round explode when it reaches its maximum distance. And the Songbirds are another one of the very powerful kind of meta weapons that saw their effectiveness reduced. Attack power was reduced from 754 per shot to 655. Impact was reduced from 724 to 635, and accumulative impact was reduced from 585 to 494. Now, I've used the Songbirds a fair bit since the patch. They're still quite strong. They make Becky's Birthday still a very viable build. That's my dual Songbirds, dual Sweet 16 shotguns, lightweight build, if you were not aware. It's still a very, very solid build. I can bust it out when I'm having a difficult fight, especially in the campaign, and it works. It's just not quite as strong as it was before, but this is not a nerf that made the Songbirds completely dead on arrival, you know? So still bust them out. They're just not going to be quite as ridiculously busted as they were. Similarly, the Stun Needle Launcher, another meta weapon, got hit pretty hard. Its impact got hit significantly, dropping from 907 to 641. Its accumulative impact was dropped from 437 to 339, and its direct hit adjustment was dropped from 225 to 195. So, I mean, we're looking at nerfs of anywhere from 20 to 35-ish% to those stats across the board. Also, notably, its damage was reduced on consecutive attacks, basically meaning that the dual Stun Needle Launcher build is not going to be nearly as devastating as it was before. Now, moving on to our back-mounted laser cannons, we saw a pretty nice change to a couple of these. The total rounds of the laser cannon VP60 LCS, its rounds were increased from 32 to 57, a nearly 50% increase. And the diffuse laser cannon, the sort of like back-mounted shotgun laser cannon, the VP60 LCD, had its rounds increased from 28 to 54. Now, notably, the triple laser cannon did not see an increase to its total rounds, and I think that's something that From needs to kind of revisit in a future patch. I used the triple laser cannon for the first time last night on my stream after this patch, and you run out of ammo for that thing so fast, especially if you dare to use its charge attack. It's basically useless for the majority of the mission. You can use it for one round of fights, like maybe a fight against an AC or a couple of tough enemies, and then it's gone. And it's like, it feels bad. So hopefully we'll see a similar change that we saw to these laser cannons to that down the line. The Pulse Shield Launcher saw a suite of buffs, which is good because I've never felt the desire to use it once. Total rounds went from 24 to 45, and the durability of the shield was increased. Its weight was reduced from 3060 to 2760, and its energy load was nearly cut in half from 620 to 382. The Lightwave Cannon Aurora, which we all kind of know is a bit of a meme, is a pretty bad weapon overall, despite the fact that it looks cool. Got some buffs. I don't know if this is going to be enough, though. Its energy load was reduced from 522 to 390, so it'll be easier to work into your builds. And your energy firearm specialization now applies to the weapon, which will definitely help. but it's just kind of weird and inconsistent, man. I don't know. More testing is required, but I'm not confident that these changes are going to be enough to save this one from the scrap heap. Moving on to our missile launchers, we saw a lot of changes here, which is very nice. I'm a big fan of missile launchers. The dual missile P-31 Duo-02 had its attack power per missile increased from 122 to 148. Its impact was increased from 76 to 94. Its accumulative impact was increased from 50 to 62, and its guidance was increased from 125 to 145. And similar to our bazookas and our grenade launchers, all of these missile launchers that we're about to talk about had their projectile speed increased. The dual missile launcher P-32 Duo-03 saw pretty similar changes to its smaller cousin: attack power from 122 to 148, impact from 76 to 94, cumulative impact from 50 to 62, and guidance increased from 125 to 145. Pretty much exactly the same across the board. It's just the bigger version of the smaller 4-cell launcher. It's the 6-cell launcher. All the same changes. The dual missile P-08 Duo-03 also saw a similar suite of changes: attack power from 146 to 177, impact from 89 to 111, a pretty nice and significant change, and cumulative impact from 58 to 72, and guidance from 122 to 145, similar to the other dual missile launchers. I'm a big fan of the P-08 Duo-03, so I'm excited to see how this works on the builds that I have it on. And then we have a couple of the active homing missiles: the P-04 ACT-01 and P-05 ACT-02, the single and dual active homing missiles. Their changes are nearly identical. They both got increased guidance from 90 to 115, which, like, good. They're homing missiles. You kind of need them to be able to home in on things. And their homing lock time was reduced. The single cell from 3.0 to 2.0, and the double from 4.0 to 2.8. They should both feel much better to use now. The needle missile Trueno had its guidance decreased from 120 to 110, and instead of being quite as homing and curving, it now has a more stable trajectory, which should make it a little less frustrating to fight, especially in PvP. The Coral Missile NGI-006 was hit across the board. Its charge attack power was reduced by almost 1,000, a nearly 20% change, from 4,999 to 4,087. Its charge impact was dropped from 3,168 to 2,496. Its accumulative impact from 3,168 to 2,496, and its direct hit adjustment from 185 to 165. This one should be, again, less frustrating to duel against. Something I'm very excited about, the laser orbit, the 45-091 orbit, which is, you know, the little turret bird that you activate and it hovers around behind you and shoots at things. Got a little bit of a buff across the board. It might need a little bit more still, as it still feels kind of pea-shootery, but hey, it helps. Its attack power per shot was increased from 122 to 135. Its direct hit adjustment from 125 to 135. Its ideal range from 130 to 198. A pretty significant change. Should definitely help it do a little bit better damage outside of its previous range. And its effective range from 220 to 262, and its projectile speed was increased. Similarly, the laser turret VP-60LT, which I've not actually used yet, but seems like it could be cool if you're more of a tactical fighter, got its projectile speed also increased, and its laser turret attacks more frequently, which should definitely lead to some pretty nice increases in DPS. More testing is required to see how significant of a change that is. Now for two very big ones. For the expansion, Pulse Protection saw a massive increase from 4,000 resilience to 7,000 resilience. This one should see a big change in the way that you play around it due to how long it lasts and how tough it's going to be. And the expansion Terminal Armor, massive increase of 2 seconds to 5 seconds. So now, like, you can just survive on 1 HP and potentially finish off your opponent, especially in PvP, for, what, 1.5 times as long? Like, 5 seconds is a massive amount of time near the end of a fight, especially in PvP. Definitely going to be experimenting with that one. Might actually swap out my assault armor that I've been using for this now. Moving on to our head and core unit updates. I'm not going to read through all these. They're pretty simple changes across the board. You can either take a look on screen now, or you can check out the link to the post in the description. I'll just run through a quick reading of all the names of these headpieces so you have a quick idea of what has been changed for the better. We're looking at the Basho, the Melander, the Veril, the Melander C3, the Tiansheng, the VP44S, the VE44A, the HC2000 Finder Eye, the HC2000 BC Shade Eye, the HC3000 Wrecker, the HS5000 Appetizer, the ELTH10 for Metza, the ELPH00 Alba, the Mind Alpha, and the HAL 826. Notably, we also have two headpieces that were nerfed. The VP44D had its attitude stability reduced, and the Mind Beta had its system recovery reduced. As far as our cores are concerned, we only have two that got changes. The Noctrier 40E saw an increase of about 25 to 30 for its attitude stability from 349 to 366, and its generator output adjustment was boosted from 84 to 91. On the flip side, with more nerfs, the Ephemera got hit pretty hard, which makes sense because it's a very powerful core piece. It had its AP reduced from 3,110 to 2,710. Its anti-energy defense was dropped from 452 to 382. Its anti-explosive defense from 430 to 350, and its attitude stability from 363 to 353. Moving on to our arms, similar to our heads, this is largely a change to recoil control in a positive direction. These are buffs here. I will quickly run through the list of what got changed positively here, and then we'll mention a couple of nerfs because they're kind of funny. So, for buffs to recoil control, we're looking at the Melander C3, the Tiansheng, the Tianlao, the VP46S, the VP46D, the Noctrier, the VE46A, the AC2000 Tool Arm, the AS5000 Salad, the ELTA10 for Metza, the ELPA00 Alba, the 04101 Mind Alpha, the 1A C01A Ephemera, and the IBC03A HAL. For two nerfs, we're looking at the Basho and the Jailbreak, funny enough. The Basho saw an anti-kinetic defense drop from 240 to 208, and the anti-explosive defense from 260 to 225, and similar changes to the Jailbreak. The anti-kinetic defense dropped from 200 to 180, and the anti-explosive defense from 235 to 215. Presumably this was to help draw the difference between the Jailbreak and the Basho, which are basically the same part. The Jailbreak is just the older, crappier version. And I imagine that From wanted the newer, fancier Bashos to have a bit more of a significant improvement over the Jailbreaks. For our legs, again, similarly, a lot of changes here, largely buffs to the attitude stability and jump distance. If there's anything notable, I'll point out the differences. Looking at the Basho, the RC Jailbreak, the Melander C3, the Tiansheng, the VP422. Notably, the VE42A, one of the heavier leg pieces, saw an AP increase along with the attitude stability and jump distance. That AP was from 5,200 to 6,000. The 2C2000 Crawler, our actual starter legs, saw a little bit of a buff. Attitude stability up from 749 to 799. Load limit from 51,200 to 53,700. And then jump distance from 90 to 100. The bipedal 2C3000 Wrecker saw an AP increase of about 20% from 4220 to 5220, as well as those attitude and jump distance changes. The 2S5000 Desert, again heavy bipedal legs, saw its AP increase from 4410 to 5450. And then we have a bunch more jump distance and attitude stability changes across the board. The Fermetzas, the Albas, the Mind Alpha, the Ephemera, the HAL 826, the Casuar 42Z, the Mind Beta, and the Spring Chicken. A lot of buffs here, a lot of different leg parts that should just feel a bit better to use overall. And a few of our heavier options got a nice buff to their AP that should make those heavyweight bipedal builds a bit more viable. Finally, we have a few more leg pieces and then our internal parts. Our two tetrapod legs got nerfed in terms of their AP. The Veril got dropped from 6850 to 5250, and the VP424 from 5600 to 4100. Tetrapod legs, tetrapod build's going to be a little bit less tanky now as a result, probably warranted. And then you love them, you hate them. The wheelchair legs, the Fortalezas, the speedy tank piece got hit pretty hard across the board, definitely warranted. Anti-kinetic defense dropped from 395 to 345, anti-energy defense from 371 to 311, the anti-explosive defense from 380 to 314, and its attitude stability from 872 to 822. Now being lightweight tank legs, they are actually a little bit more in line with what you would expect from such a description, being less tanky and less stable overall. We'll see if that makes the wheelchair build a little less viable than it was. It's still going to be really strong. It's very unique and very powerful, but it'll at least be a little bit easier to deal damage to now. Now for our boosters, we have a change to upward thrust across the board with all of these. So again, I'll just list them off. The Kikaku, the BST G2 P04, the BST G1 P10, the BST G2 P06 SPD, the Alula 21E, the Flugel 21Z, the BC 0600-12345, the BC 0400 Mule, the IA C01B Gills, and the IB C03B NGI 001s. All of these saw an increase to their upward thrust. All of them will be a bit better at verticality now, which is very nice. Being able to quickly fly up and get out of range of certain attacks is very important. Finally, we have a couple of FCS and generator changes to talk about. We saw some close range assist reductions to 3 pieces. The FCS G2P05 saw it drop from 45 to 42, not too big of a hit. The FC006 Abbott got a change from 83 to 70, a bit more of a significant hit. And then the FC008 Talbot saw, again, a more minor change of 67 to 63. Again, those are changes to the close range assist for those FCS pieces. Finally, we have our generators, and we basically have some buffs to some underperformers here with the Joso and the Yaba, as well as the Hokushi. The Josu saw its energy capacity increase from 2200 to 2300, not a huge change here. Supply recovery from 400 to 500, though, that's pretty nice. And energy firearm spec from 52 to 72, so these internal combustion engines, a little bit better with the energy weapons. Still not the best, but hey, it's something. The Yaba saw similar increases. Its energy capacity went from 2550 to 2850, a bit more of an increase than the Joso. Supply recovery from 500 to 555, and energy firearm spec from 75 to 95. Finally, moving on to the Hokushi, its energy capacity increased from 2710, which was not bad, to an even nicer 3160, and its energy firearm spec went up from 70 to 90. So overall, a lot of great changes, and it's great to be able to actually put some numbers to these changes. Obviously, still the biggest things are the hits to the Zimmies and the Songbirds and the Stun Needle Launcher and all that type of stuff, but a lot of underperforming weapons and parts, both like extremities and internal parts, got very much needed buffs that's going to make them a lot more viable in both the campaign and in PvP. Now, something that's notable is it has seemed to me that these changes apply to enemy ACs in the campaign as well, which has actually made some opponents really, really nasty. Like Volta, if you fight Volta in the damn assault mission, bro, that man slaps. Like, the positive changes to grenade launchers and bazookas did him a world of good, and he will absolutely wreck your shit if you are not careful. So we need to do some testing to see how AC fights are now in New Game through New Game++, but suffice to say, these aren't just positive changes for us, they're positive changes for the enemy too, so don't get too comfortable when you're doing some of those AC duels in the campaign. As far as PvP is concerned, we should see a much wider range of viable builds now. Far less dual Zimmies, dual Stun Needle Launchers, or dual Songbirds dominating things. Rifles, charge rifles, lightweight jumping builds, all that type of stuff. Should be far more capable of handling things now, so I can't wait to experiment with that. But with that said, thank you all so much for listening. I know this was a long one, a little dry, but those of you who stuck around to the end, thank you so much. I wanted to kind of do this as an addendum to my video from yesterday, since I said that I would if anyone posted the exact deets, and here we are. Thank you once again as well to UmbraBliss for putting this information together. You are an absolute god amongst pilots. We would be lost without you. Having these specific numbers for these changes is huge. If you like my videos and you enjoy this type of content for Armored Core 6 or any of the other types of games that I play, a like and a sub would be very much appreciated. But without any further ado, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.